Thanks for joining us for this episode. And before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about any guest featured in this episode or access any content or resources discussed, be sure to check out the show notes in the episode description. We hope today's episode increases truth and inspires hope in the lives of your church, your business, your family, and beyond. Welcome to the Must Increase Podcast.
You and I did have the same job. You know, I worked, it's literally the exact same job description. Of course, you've done it more recently than I have. I was about 6 years ago serving in that as that media director role at the same church. And, of course, we could always, of course, with you, it's a little more recent, so maybe you don't feel this way as much. But me, looking back, I'm like, oh, wow, I really could have done things a lot differently, there's so much that I've learned just from, operating as a freelancer that I'm like, man, I really, I could have done that even as someone in the media director position. So I guess let's start with talking a little bit about, let's start with the positive as far as being that in-house media director, like on the team. Let's start with, some things that you already kind of alluded to some of them, but some things that you liked about, that approach to church media.
So probably the target audience we're talking to, either they have one main guy that does all their media, or they have like a youth leader that does their youth group, maybe some sports things, as well as their design. And the one obvious benefit, I would say, is you're right there with the church team. You're in the staff meetings, so when someone has a need, you're right there face to face, and they're able to connect with you easily. Versus, if you're not in the office outside, they have to go through whether email or call to get a hold of you. So I think the benefit is you're right there with the person. You can sit in their office talking with them about their project, and you have a lot more time to kind of push them to come up with a purpose, reason, and push maybe a design that you would prefer, and they might lean more towards since you're in-house versus someone they're contracting out. And so I think that camaraderie that you have as an in-house designer, whether you're a youth leader doing it part-time or a full-time, that I think is pretty priceless. You can kind of create that as a out-of-house designer, but really you don't have that when you're in-house. So
I do remember that. Again, it's been a while, but I remember that sense of like having for example, these brainstorming sessions, where you could come together with, me as the media guy. I remember one of the things I really did enjoy was preparing for like an Easter Sunday. So it was, me and, maybe the guy that oversaw music and guy overseeing, kind of the outreach portion of it. And we'd all get together and could just brainstorm, ideas in terms of creatively how media could incorporate into all of that. And, I'll be honest, I enjoyed that, and we put together some really good events, Yeah,
and being face to face, they're going to share stuff with you that, they may not share on a form that you fill out if you're a freelance designer or over the phone or something. So, and you're, a lot of times you're the pastor that is decision makers right there.
And I will say that's something that in my kind of even more recently that I've tried because, the COVID era, we were all going, Zoom calls became the cool thing to do. And so because I always preferred something like that even before COVID, but because it became kind of the norm, now it's easier for me to, tell somebody like, let's not just get on a phone call. Let's not just do this over email. Let's take a time. Let's find a time and let's get on an actual video call. And so that's something, even though it's not, there's a difference between even like this podcast, like you're in the room with me right now. I don't do most of my interviews like this. Most of them are over Zoom, but this is much more free flowing, because there's that little bit of Zoom latency and hesitation and lag or whatever you want to call it. But I will say trying to bring that into incorporate some more of that, like what you're saying, that collaboration of let's not just email about this. Let's not just submit a form or whatever
Right.
you said, which that is part of my process.
Yeah.
But let's actually get on a call and get on a video call and actually see each other's faces and whatnot. And so that is something that, even if you do choose to outsource, like you could still kind of incorporate it. But yeah, there is nothing that replaces in-person collaboration,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely something, like I said, I enjoyed that aspect of it. So
we can move on to another
Yeah, go ahead.
pro. So another pro I would say of having an in-house designer would be that designer will know the inside culture of your church. So if he's creating a teen activity flyer, right, he might be serving in the teen group on Sundays. He might be, like myself, taught a graphic design class with some of those teens in my class. And so knowing the inside culture helps you know, like, okay, especially what style will work in this church.
Yeah,
Right? What style
exactly.
will work in this church? Different people, different preferences. And so that's always good to know. And like, I'm a freelance designer for a church in Ohana. And for years, I just designed.
that's in Hawaii, right?
Hawaii, yeah. I just designed their stuff remotely, and we would work on Slack. But then recently, I actually flew to Hawaii and got to meet the deacons there, got to meet the pastor there, and just in the building, and literally just like meeting them gave me like personal investment in wanting to like make their stuff as best as I can.
Yeah.
Just seeing them in person. So I do think we talked about collaboration as well as being on the inside of their culture.
Well, yeah.
Helps.
For example, there's something about seeing, for something like, let's think about display signage. There's something about being in the building
Sure.
and seeing, oh, that's where that sign is actually going
Yeah,
to be.
yeah.
Maybe I would have said do a 4x6 vinyl banner, but now that I'm seeing it, no, why don't we go with a couple different banners that create, spread across to create an image. That creativity is hard to. It's hard to capture that even over like a FaceTime or something like
Yeah,
that.
or you've been to the event that you're designing for,
Yeah,
right? So if
yeah.
you've been to the Harvest Festival and that's what happened. I went to the Harvest Festival at the church I go to, and it was just incredible. And so I really wanted to emphasize that atmosphere within a design. So what were the two things we talked about? Collaboration,
Collaboration,
and then like
kind of just being in the space, like able to see and actually, the physical building
and the culture of the church.
Yeah, the
Yep,
culture. That's a
yep,
great way of putting
that's
it.
the word.
Yeah, and I will say culture is big too on a different level. Maybe this could be like a sub point of this main point, if you will, of just understanding beyond the physical aspects of the property or the campus is learning who they are. Like, for example, if you're going to work at a church full time, there's a very likely chance, this isn't universally true, but there's a very likely chance that you're attending that church and you're going there for, weekly services and, maybe you're involved on different levels. I know with me, that was the advantage I had when I did work full time is, well, that's the church I grew up at. And so I knew the culture inside and out. And so that did help because, and I will say, I mean, again, you can learn a little bit of that through as being a freelancer. Longer you are with a church, working with them, you can kind of learn that. But being a part of it every week, as far as in-house, that's something that
I would say it's obviously faster if you're at the church yourself.
Of course.
That you learn the culture versus working remotely for the church.
Yeah. So, what's another reason? Yeah.
Pro for
still talking pros.
In-house. I mean, I would say the speed at which you can communicate with the leaders of your ministry or an event. You and I both, we work remotely and we use Slack or email, whatever it is, and you got to wait for that person to reply back. And then if you don't really understand what they're saying, you got to reply back to that. So that can create some lag time. But you can literally walk in that person's office and sit down with them and chat with them. There's pros and cons, like chat about random stuff when you finally get on the topic. Create some fun atmosphere. And just kind of, you can sense their vibe on an event, whether it's really important you spend a lot of time on, or like, hey, this is something really quick, you don't need to spend too much time on. So I feel like the quickness and the like kind of realness you get when you talk to them in person, I can just always. I mean, I worked across the campus. I had to walk across the campus.
Yeah.
But for like the school, I was able to go to the principal of the school I did work for and talk with them right there. And it just, I think that helps get the project done sooner.
Yeah, and that kind of can go along with talking about turnaround time. You know, it's a lot in pretty much every scenario. If you need something quick, you're not necessarily going to get it with a freelancer. I mean, I have made exception, and I've been able to make that happen for certain churches I work with. But that's not the normal. That's usually like an exception. Like, oh, hey, something came up or whatever, and that is something that. And I don't know if that's a pro or a con, but if they're right down the hall, if you will, to say, hey, man, we need this design now. That I mean, again, they're for me. And again, I know we're supposed to be talking the positive stuff, but for me, I found that to actually be a big
challenge,
drawback because it was that became because when I was there, not only was me as the graphic designer, because I was the media director, but the graphics doing all the design myself. I was there on property, but also we did all of our printing. The vast majority of our actual printing we did on property. They had a massive digital press out, on a different building kind of dedicated to printing, and they're not doing as much with that anymore, thankfully. But, it was like they would ask for, hey, we need this designed, but we also need it printed. And I'm not kidding you. There were times where it was same day. And that became my whole day. Like designing this, getting it approved, getting it edited, getting it proofed, revising it, getting it signed off on it, and going out and printing it. That would have represented an entire workday.
Now we're kind of getting into the cons.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. But there can be advantage to having, like I said, having someone there in terms of, I think what you're talking about with communication in particular, quick turnaround on communication is vital no matter what environment you're in, whether you're working, in-house together or if it's, have a remote guy I'm outsourcing to.
Yeah, like I remember times where I would have a meeting about a theme or a look for an event. I'd go back and work on it either 2 days later or something, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I can't remember everything he talked about that. Well, freelancing, you have to like email and wait and get back and forth, but with being in person, you just go straight to them and even say, hey, you said this thing, but I don't know if that's going to work. I just try to do something and I'm not coming up with anything that looks good. What if we revise it, right? You could do that like on the fly right there because you're in person, and they can easily just reject it or accept it. So
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like I said, that quick turnaround thing can turn into a con quickly. But what you're talking about in terms of communication, and then I have to say too, though, I mean, I have churches I work with remotely that are great about their communication. They're instant. They get back. The ones that I like, and again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I do like the churches that and I try to encourage them to do this. They insist we have maybe a weekly or bi-weekly call so that we can, so we can touch base and talk about what's coming up and have a little bit more of that real-time communication. And so, that's definitely something that you benefit from, though, because it's so much more organic when you're in-house. I don't know it's been so long since I did it. I'm having trouble thinking of the pros.
I am too. I mean, I would say, you might come up with a pro, but it might have like a con with it or a negative side to it.
Yeah, kind of like the turnaround thing.
Yeah, turnaround thing. I mean, obviously the pro is being in-house, at least for the designer, is that all of the equipment needed, you can request that from your church, right? They'll buy you your laptop, they get you your desk. If you want a camera or a tripod or whatever you might need. I mean, I was a print graphic designer, so that equipment I didn't need too much. But if I wanted to do some cool signage, I mean, it was all on them. Or if I wanted a drawing pad or an iPad or an iPad pencil, like they would get that for me. I didn't have to like worry about me purchasing it. So obviously all that, the office, everything's on them. You don't have to worry about any of that. So I felt like that was a really good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this is a larger church, so they have the budget for those kind of things.
Sure,
I know there's probably pastors out there that are like, oh, you can get an iPad for me, and
Right,
I understand that because they don't necessarily have the budget. But your point there is that you have access to, resources that you may not as doing some independent, and I can relate to that, and you can as well. I'm on my own. All this equipment I need, I have to buy it myself.
Buy it yourself. And if it breaks, you have to buy it yourself.
You have to take care of it. So I think it's a good place for us to kind of pick it up next time.
Okay.
And I think next time we'll start talking, in the next episode, we'll start talking a little bit more about, there's one more thought I have that kind of transition us from, I think, this idea of hiring someone in-house, and then talking about maybe transitioning to how you can make that work with working with someone and outsourcing it. So
we are so glad you joined us for this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends. You can connect with us online at mustincrease.com, and if you'd like a topic or question to be featured on a future episode, send us a text to 615-900-4461. Thanks again for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to increase truth and inspire hope in the lives of others right here on the Must Increase podcast.